So where are we in the discussion so far? We are discussing about the labor supply. In the discussion on labor supply, we have seen a few analyses, and where we are at the moment is over here. We have discussed about the effect of hours of work decision, where first we have used the indifference curve analysis to understand between the preference of worker given the level of consumption and leisure time. And then together with the indifference curve, we use the budget line or budget constraint to find the tangential point or tangency conditions. After that, knowing that when there is a change in V or non-labor income, so we need to know how to show the effect of change in non-labor income using the diagram. And we also have done a discussion to decompose the effect of wage change, where the effect of wage change could result in the income effect and the substitution effect. So these are the analysis that I have discussed with you earlier. Now we want to go back a step backward, where we need to ask this question: work or not to work? Why this question? Because this is the most important question to everyone. Like if I ask you whether you want to work or not to work, maybe most of you or all of you will say, yes, you want to work. But if you have the option not to work, would you? And on what basis you decide whether you want to work or not to work? That's the most important question we want to explore after this. What we have done before is, whenever someone says, yes, I want to work, we want to know how many hours the person would allocate between work and leisure. That's what we have done so far. Okay, so now let's go to this discussion on work or not to work. Simple question, but a very interesting analysis. So this is the big question we are asking. Whenever someone asks you this question, let's look at it from an Islamic perspective. In my opinion, from readings many opinions by scholars, Islamic scholars, the default position in the teaching of Islam is that it is wajib upon the man, especially for the husband or a father, to provide provisions for the family. The responsibility is on the shoulder of the husband or father. So, given this question, if it is given to a man, his default answer is yes, I want to work. Why? Because it is wajib from the Islamic perspective. This is the command of Allah Ta'ala. More of an option is when this question is presented to a woman. Work or not to work? The option is theirs. It is not wajib for a wife to work because the nafaqah should be provided by the husband. And only recently, by recently I mean especially after the end of World War II, in many countries, the influx of women into the job market started to increase. The female labor force participation has shown a continuous increase since then. It is very normal today to see that women are working for many reasons. I have asked this question to my female students before: work or not to work? Most of their answers are yes, they want to work. Mainly because of the debt obligation. Most of the students borrowed money for their higher education, so they need to repay this loan, and therefore they have basically no choice but to jump to the job market to earn a living and then to use some of the money earned to pay the loan. That's one main reason. Another main reason is it is also due to the pressure of the high standard of living today, especially if you live in an urban area. Therefore, it is common to find both husband and wife are working, and that's made up a better household income. Instead of one single income, when the wife is also working, that's would provide better in terms of the household income level. And again, this goes back to the issue of affordability of life in a modern context. But long time ago, if we go back to history, basically women would involve in housework, not something that involve the nature of our modern work today. In fact, when we say work also in a modern context, it is also very different in our time and previously. Work to our grandfather is not to punch in at 8 and to punch out at 5. Work to our grandfather, whom most of them were working in the agricultural sector, is to work according to the season. They don't have hours work defined. It's instead spread out throughout the whole season over the year. But work to our father is different than our grandfather. Our father might be those who punch in at 8 and punch out at 5. But work to the current generation again has faced a new change, especially due to the pandemic. Now many people are working from home, so no longer about punch in and punch out, is more about the output or the outcomes from the work done or productivity. So here you can see even the work has evolved over time. This is also a very interesting philosophical nature of the idea of working from one generation to another generation. It's a good research paper that I plan to write. Now, to answer that question, work or not to work, that later will bring us to this concept of reservation wage. Before we go further, let's look at this diagram and try to unfold the complexity of the drawings here. Because I don't have animation, so what you see here is the final drawing of everything. In fact, with a good animation, we can step by step show you what's going on. Nevertheless, let's look at it. So this is again the familiar diagram earlier where we represent consumption on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis we present the level of leisure, hours of leisure. So from the origin here to the right means higher hours of leisure. So what we need to focus first in this diagram is to look at the indifference curve UO, which is this indifference curve. You need to imagine that all other lines and curves are not there. So we need to focus first on this indifference curve. So this is indifference curve UO. And this indifference curve passes through point E. So this is point E. And we notice that indifference curve UO passes through point E. So that's one observation that we need to pay attention first. So at point E, we have the level of time T. This is the overall non-sleeping time available to this worker given by T. Remember before we say that T equal to leisure plus H, hours work. This is the overall non-sleeping time or the discretionary time available to the workers. We assume in a day it is 16 hours. But this analysis would involve a week hour. We find that if this worker is not working, spending all the non-sleeping time for leisure, he would still be able to survive, because at this point, he still can have some level of consumption. Whether to work or not depends on the rate at which leisure can be traded for an additional level of consumption. So given the budget line GE, so let's draw the budget line GE. So this is the budget line GE, and let's say that given the budget line GE here, the wage rate is given by the slope of that line, and here it's stated that we denote that as W low. That means this budget line gives the worker a very low wage rate. So what happened here is the person would not enter the labor market if the wage rate available to him is W low. Why? Because point X, this one, point X, give this worker a much lower utility. That means point X give the worker much lower utility, this utility curve, this indifference curve. So if the worker receives W mean as indicated by this GE budget line, this worker's decision is not to work, because by not working, this worker is better off at point E, spending all the entire time for leisure and still enjoying much higher level of utility as indicated by U0 here. So that's one point we note from the situation established in this case. Now say that wage is W high. Where is W high? It is given by this budget line HE. So HE is the budget line, and the slope of HE is given by W high. And what happened in this case is this budget line is tangential to point Y over here, where point Y falls on a much higher indifference curve as compared to point E. UH is higher than U0. So this worker is better off at point Y, provided that he earns WH. So in this case, given W high, this worker then would enter the job market, therefore he would work. Therefore, now we have two reference points. We have GE with the slope of W low, and we have HE with the slope of W high. The reservation wage would fall somewhere between these two levels of wage. In this diagram, notice that the reservation wage is captured by this line that is tangential to point E. The slope of this line, it is equal to W tilde, this one. So W tilde here is the reservation wage. Alright? What we can say here is at W tilde, this person would be indifferent between work and leisure. But anything less than the slope of this line, indicated by, for example, the slope of GE, this person would say, I will not work. But anything steeper than this line, such as HE, the person would say he want to work. So W tilde defines the reservation wage. So what we can say here is, if W tilde is more than the market wage rate, then the person will not work. On the other hand, if W tilde is less than the market wage, such as W high, the person or the worker would work. From this discussion, we find that W tilde represents the concept of the reservation wage. It's a wage level below which a worker will not work. So knowing this concept of reservation wage, this is a very important concept for the policymakers, for the employers to identify. because this would determine whether the worker would join the job market or not. So what is your reservation wage? How do we find our reservation wage? We can do some experiment, if you like, to know the level of an individual reservation wage. For example, if I ask you, given your bachelor degree qualification, would you work if I offer you RM 2,000 ringgit per month? Some may answer yes, some may answer no. Let's say my answer is no. I will not work for 2,000 ringgit per month. But then, what if the offer goes up to 3,000 ringgit per month? Maybe my answer changed to yes, I will work. So here we can identify that for this person, for me, my reservation wage could be somewhere between 3,000 and 2,000, and we can narrow down to find a more specific reservation wage. This is when sometimes whenever you want to apply for a job, there is a section in the form that you fill in asking for your asking wage. They would ask, what's your asking wage, or what's the wage rate you expect from the company. Please be careful with the number that you want to put in that column. Reservation wage is about motivation. During a recession, reservation wage workforce tend to be lower, but when there is full employment, reservation wage could be on average much higher, set by the overall workers. So that's one concept we learned today. Inshallah, I'll discuss more things after this. See you next time. Wassalam.